Welcome members and deputies. Before we start proceedings today, I want to break with tradition to extend a very warm welcome to a very special cohort of young people. With the help of the Little Blue Heroes Foundation, we have 4 honorary Gardaí who are looking in on us today from home, and we have 7 honorary Gardaí present in the gallery with us today. Those looking in from home are Shane Hearn, Lennon Shanahan, Lucy O'Shea and Holly Carroll. And hopefully we'll greet them another day here. But in the gallery with us today that we met earlier are Joey Moss, Hayden Smith-Kirwan, Connell Dunn, Skylar Sheehan, Amelia Sexton, Jack Fitzgerald and Roisin Crowe. I thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you have had a great day because you truly are an inspiration to us all. And welcome to all the other children and members and our people in the gallery as well. And of course, not to forget the adult Gardaí that are accompanying. Thank you very much. Now we will take leaders' questions under Standing Order 38. Deputy MaryLouMcDonald of Sinn Féin. Deputy. With
these little blue heroes, I think we are in very safe hands with outstanding people like you. So welcome and thank you for being here. Taoiseach, households continue to be hammered left, right and centre by soaring prices with no let-up. It's extortionate rent, big electricity and gas bills, huge fuel prices, unaffordable childcare, runaway insurance premiums. Prices are out of control. Workers and families are squeezed, forced to live week to week, and they ask themselves, when will all of this stop, because they can't keep up. And nowhere is all of this clearer than when it comes to the weekly shop. A report published today by PwC found that 70% of Irish customers are extremely worried by the cost of food. This is just the latest, Taoiseach, in a series of reports confirming what people already know, which is that food prices are through the roof. So let's take a look at some of the basics. According to the CSO, in the last year alone, a pound of butter is up €1. A kilo of Irish cheddar cheese up 57 cents. 2 litres of milk is up 27 cents. And writing in the Irish Times last week, Conor Pope found, according to figures provided by PriceWatch, that a kilo of chicken that cost €4.99 in 2022 now costs €11. That's just crazy. Many households are now paying €3,000 extra a year in the supermarket than they were in 2021. So little wonder that families are finding it harder and harder to put food on the table, and in some cases they're cutting back on basics. People now feel serious pressure and anxiety as they push their trolley to the checkout. Taoiseach, in May 2023, your colleague Minister Neil Richmond told the public that he had this situation under control. He puffed out his chest, he called in the big supermarket chains and declared that they had just 6 weeks to get the prices down. Well, that was 110 weeks ago, Taoiseach, and clearly the Minister failed to exert any real pressure on those retailers because he was duly and unceremoniously ignored. And things have only gotten worse for customers at the checkouts. And then that was it. That single limp intervention was the entirety of the government effort to tackle runaway food prices. You couldn't get the job done, so you just walked away and left households to feel the pain. And your latest plan, it seems, is to do absolutely nothing. To stick your head in the sand, allow people to be ripped off week in and week out. So out of touch is your government that you dig in and refuse to bring forward supports to help hard-pressed households deal with these out-of-control prices. Your message to workers and families under enormous pressure is you are on your own. Tá praisna beatréis méadú go hard na spéire. Tá Chowley ó imu gach seachtain nuair a hain siad den siopadóracht. Caithí an rialtas gníomhú chun daoine a chusanj ón a costais ulmhóra seo. Taoiseach, was it all just bull and bluster when government called in the big supermarket chains 2 years ago? Will you do anything at all to tackle soaring food prices? And how on earth is it that you refuse to consider any cost of living supports when people are under such pressure just to make ends meet?
First of all, could I join with you, Cian, in welcoming our special guests from Tipperary and our little blue heroes who have come to watch proceedings here in the Dáil. And I know you had a busy morning with a Garda escort and we're greeted by the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, the Cian Corla, and I think Deputy Michael Murphy also. I was delighted to attend the Little Blue Heroes Ball in Killarney earlier this month, and I want to thank the organisation and thank all those who support the organisation for the extraordinary work that they do for children and families, and in particular to pay a very warm tribute to An Garda Síochána. This entire charity emanated from a number of Gardaí and retired Gardaí. Their volunteerism and their commitment is second to none, and they reflect the degree to which An Garda Síochána are embedded in every community in this country, and thanks be to God, we are fortunate that they are, giving us the police force that we have. Could I say at the outset to the Deputy that government is very, very conscious of price increases and the cost of living more generally. And even though inflation has fallen and is down to 2%, the bottom line is the elevated level of inflation arising out of the post-COVID situation and the war on Ukraine has meant that food prices are very high, and that is acknowledged. And we have provided substantial support over the last number of budgets, which were decried by the opposition. But we did do it, significant financial support to households and to businesses. Task, the Think Tank for Action and Social Change, published its annual report today. It found that the temporary cost of living support, such as the pandemic unemployment payment, energy credits, lump sum welfare payments, played a critical role in reducing poverty risk among vulnerable households. And without those interventions, Ireland at risk of poverty rate would have increased to 13% in 2022, 14% in 2023. Instead, it fell to 10.6% and 11.7% respectively. So the supports we did bring in were effective for their time, without any question. And we've made it clear that Budget 2026 will focus on measures that are sustainable and maintainable in the long term, with a particular focus on child poverty, disability, and of course housing. And in addition to those cost of living measures we brought in, of course, last April we extended the VAT reduction to 9% on gas and electricity. In other words, we maintained the reduction. And that's benefited households about €70 per household for gas, 55 per household for electricity. And that's further supported by the 40% reduction in the renewable electricity PSO levy for 2025 and 2026, announced on the 14th of June by Minister O'Brien. And of course, from the 1st of June, women will receive HRT free of charge. From September 2025, as we know, free school books will be extended to all students in post-primary schools. I mean, that was a major measure that the Deputy ignored completely in her presentation. All primary schools are eligible for free hot school meals. So these are significant measures that are long-term and that have had a real benefit in terms of bringing down costs. Free public transport for children, including those aged 5 to 8 years, will be introduced later this year. And we've also acted to shield workers from higher tax burden by adjusting income tax credits and bans in successive budgets. We are a significant importer of energy and food produce, and that has resulted in significant additional costs associated with transport, logistics, and our small market size. Minister Dillon has engaged with the Competition and Consumer Protection Commission to engage with the industry and provide an up-to-date assessment of it.
To respond.
So 70% of people are concerned about food prices. That's what I'm raising with you, Taoiseach. I gave you some examples earlier. Let me Just give you some more CSO data over 5 years. Sugar up 54%. Cod, fillet of cod up 55%. Pork sausages 21%. Lamb 48%. Spaghetti 46%. This is the reality that people are facing every week when they go to the supermarket to do their shop. And I know certainly people are telling us the kind of pressure that is putting on them, and they rightly expect that government will intervene. And I'm asking you quite simply, in respect of people's grocery bills, their weekly shop, what are you proposing to do? Was it just bluster? Was it just performative 2 years ago when the minister summoned in the big supermarket chains and told them what was what? Nothing changed. People are still to the pin of their collar. So I'd like you to be clear, Taoiseach, what are you doing, proposing to do now in respect of soaring costs and prices that are causing real pressure for families across the country?
Yeah, we will deal with this issue in the budget, but would make the point to you, consumer price inflation, as measured by the European Union HICP index, has eased back significantly over the past 2 years, with the annual inflation rate in May 2025 now standing at 1.4% compared with 2% in May of last year. That's below the 2% target rate of inflation set by the ECB. In April, Ireland had the 6th lowest rate of inflation among the 27 EU countries. Quite a remarkable outcome given the strength of domestic economic activity here vis-à-vis other European countries. And additionally, with inflation expected to grow by 2% this year, nominal wage growth is set to reach 5.5%. That will result in real income wages growth of between 3 and 3.5% this year. And when inflation was high, we didn't have that to offset it. We now have it at significant levels, and that ultimately is an effective way of dealing with this, in addition to the measures that we will take in the budget to deal with that. You've had your chance.
Deputy Ivana Bacik, Deputy, please. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
At the outset, I want to give a warm welcome to the little blue heroes who are with us in Leinster House today or who are watching online, and I want to commend the Gardaí involved in the organisation. You're all very welcome here today, and I hope you have a very pleasant day with us. This week, Taoiseach, primary school children across the country will be released from school for their summer holidays. They'll wave goodbye to teachers, SNAs and classrooms. They will put away their school bags and books until after the holidays. But Taoiseach, some children will have very little to look forward to this summer. The latest statistics on homelessness will be released on Friday. As it stands, in Ireland today, 4,775 children are recorded as homeless. And this figure is likely to go up on Friday, just as it has done consistently since a Fianna Fáil minister lifted the eviction ban in 2023. Those children in homelessness, Taoiseach, face a very different prospect to their peers this summer. They do not have forever homes. Some entire families are sharing one room in a homeless hub or a hotel or a hostel. Their children have no room to play, no room to grow. And Taoiseach, their parents face an awful situation, often forced to make really difficult choices. Yesterday I visited a dog shelter. There, I heard from staff who told me about the anguish faced by families forced to give up beloved family pets because they're entering homelessness. I met one family dog and a litter of little puppies. Family owners desperate to keep her, but couldn't do so because they'd received a notice to quit. Taoiseach, Dublin City Council anticipates that the cost of housing people in emergency accommodation will increase by €35 million this year. Spending has more than trebled in the last decade, demand-driven, and we know, of course, spending on emergency accommodation is increasing because more people, and shamefully more children, are being left without a home. They've been failed by the state, they've been failed by this government, and the cost of that failure is more than just monetary. I think we're all aware of the immense human cost of families forced to give up pets, of families forced to move into one room, of children whose lives are being curtailed in this way. And the consequences, Taoiseach, of allowing children to be left without a home are disastrous, both for the families as individual households, but also for our entire social order. But your government is not offering any prospect of hope to families facing notices to quit. Your policies are tolerating the intolerable. Notices of termination are the biggest driver of homelessness in Dublin. 32% of all those presenting as homeless in 2023, 42% in 2024, a 10% increase in 1 year. What is your government offering families in this scenario? Nothing. You know, Taoiseach, we have offered in Labour a homeless families bill which would oblige local authorities to prioritise the needs of children as members of families, not just treating them as dependents of homeless adults. There's a consensus across housing charities that this would make a difference to families.
Thank you,
but
Deputy.
Taoiseach, for years, successive housing ministers have delayed on this bill. So
Taoiseach,
when will you start treating child homelessness like the emergency it is?
Taoiseach.
First of all, I want to thank the Deputy for raising what is a very important issue. I would take issue with the term released from school. Children these days enjoy school and have very good experiences in our schools, but they are going out to enjoy the summer holidays, and we will, through many other avenues of government, endeavour to give supports to children throughout the summer holidays. But more specifically, the issue of homelessness is key. And one of the key strategies we have is obviously to shorten the time any particular family experiences emergency accommodation and can receive social housing. We've built more social houses in the last 4 years than we did in 40 years. So the increase in the building of social housing and in the provision of social housing through other mechanisms has increased exponentially, and that is ultimately a key way of dealing with homelessness. Furthermore, Housing First programme is key also, which was recommended strongly a number of years ago by the homeless agencies. There are now 1,000 tenancies for homeless people with complex health and social needs, with further significant numbers planned for 2025. And that is a very important intervention. We have no issue, with examining your legislation, although it needs, are you suggesting that those perhaps who are on the list for 8 or 9 years, there is always a balance, has to be struck between those on the homeless list vis-à-vis those who are on the social housing list for quite considerable lengths of time and who have an entitlement to a social house as well in terms of the allocation of social houses. But what will be key is increasing the number of social houses that we build and doing it consistently over the next decade and more. And already the building of social houses has had an impact in terms of the social housing lists in many cities and in many local authority areas, and also in terms of the issue of homelessness itself, in terms of reducing the timelines and the length of time that people experience in emergency accommodation. An eviction ban would actually be regressive in terms of supply. I mean, ultimately, we need more supply of homes and housing. And an eviction ban, in our view, and the Housing Commission made it clear that the Oireachtas's approach to the rental market over the last 4 years was too interventionist. That's what the Housing Commission more or less said. It was reactive, sorry, might be a better word they used, with the result that it dampened supply into the market and resulting in exacerbating the situation. So I think we cannot endorse policies that would make the supply situation much worse and would, by definition, make the homelessness issue much worse.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And I think that
Deputy
needs to be acknowledged also.
Deputy Bacik.
Taoiseach, first I should reassure you and any school staff watching that, of course, I was using the word release in a somewhat tongue-in-cheek fashion. Our schools are generally very happy places and children are generally very happy to receive an education. We have excellent school staff across the country. But on a more serious note, what I'm hearing from you and from your government is nothing that offers any reassurance to families who wish to be released from homelessness. And that's the sad reality, is that your government is offering no hope to people. You know, we put forward the Homeless Families Bill 8 years ago in the Labour Party. In that time, the number of children in homelessness has almost doubled. And there is no sense of urgency or ambition from government. And Taoiseach, maybe look back at your own party's past. In the 1960s, Fianna Fáil ensured state intervention directly in the delivery of homes through a national building agency under Sean Lemass. Lots of issues with that, but certainly there was no difficulty with having a state-led focus on delivery of homes. And that's what we in the Labour Party have called for. Let the state, through local authorities and the LDA and a state construction company, deliver homes again at the scale that children in homelessness so desperately need.
For the last 5 years, before I came back into government in 2020, we have built close to 48,000 social houses delivered, right? That's more than anything near it for 40 years. You'd have to go back to the 70s to get that level of social housing construction. But we need more because the population has increased. And that is a factor in this. And the composition of those presenting for homelessness and emergency accommodation has also changed. And is much more complex than perhaps the immediate understanding of the term or of the experience of homelessness today. There's a European context to it, which is very real now. And there's a blurring of a lot of distinctions as well in terms of entitlements and so forth. So we have to be very clear-eyed in relation to that. And we are treating this as an emergency and as urgent. And we're doing everything we can through local authorities and through the approved housing bodies and those involved in the homelessness area to address
Deputy
this issue.
Cian O'Callaghan of the Social Democrats.
Gurv Margaret, Cian Corley, and I also want to welcome the little blue heroes in the Gardaí and welcome and indeed commend everyone involved in that. Taoiseach, I have to say, listening to your answers there, I wonder, do you get it at all? You were presented with the stark reality that people face in terms of grocery prices, and you rattled off a list of numbers on inflation rather than acknowledging the real difficulties that people are facing when they do their weekly shop. I don't know if you even notice or acknowledge the problems that people are facing. 70% of people are either very worried or extremely worried when it comes to food prices. Taoiseach, will you even acknowledge that? Many families are now spending an extra €3,000 a year on their grocery bills and shopping, and prices are still increasing. Anyone doing their weekly shopping will have noticed recently prices again beginning to soar. Taoiseach, do you even acknowledge that reality for people? We're talking here about parents who are working really hard all week, who are going without meals so that they can feed their children. We're talking about pensioners who have to leave items behind in the checkout, which they can no longer afford. We're talking about families scrimping and saving just so they can get by. Taoiseach, no one should be going hungry. No one should be having to skip meals to feed their children. And no pensioner should be worried about keeping food on the table. We're talking about the basics here, Taoiseach. What it costs in this country just to survive. Buying the essentials, milk, butter, pasta, bread, now costs more than it ever has before. The level of stress and anxiety that this is causing families is growing. Soaring food prices are something that the government promised to address, Taoiseach. It's now more than 2 years since Minister Neil Richmond organised his meeting with grocery retailers to discuss runaway prices. And what happened at that meeting was it was a talking shop. It was convened for optics. He turned up, wagged his finger, and everyone went home. Well, grocery prices are higher now than they ever have been. So if you think that was a success, it certainly hasn't been. We all have suspicions that we're being ripped off in this country and price gouged when it comes to grocery prices, but there's no way to prove it because we don't have full transparency when it comes to supermarket profits. Taoiseach, people are handing over €10 billion a year to supermarkets to buy food for their families. So why is there not full transparency about profits here? Supermarket chains are not required to publish detailed and full accounts about their profits. Given that people have to buy food, there's no choice on this. Why is this not a requirement for all supermarket retailers and chains? Taoiseach, there is a simple answer to this. You could act. So I'm asking you, are you going to act to require all supermarket chains and retailers to do this? And Taoiseach, I don't want diversionary answers here, distractions. It's a simple question. I want you to ask it, please. Answer the question.
Taoiseach, please.
Well, if you are listening, Taoiseach, are you going to act?
Sorry, Deputy.
Am I going to?
Taoiseach.
All supermarket chains have to declare in full detail their profits.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, I just want to say to the Deputy, he has a tremendous habit of asserting what I said earlier, which of course I didn't say at all. I didn't rattle off any figures when I was answering Deputy MacDonald. No, I didn't. I'll tell you what I said. What I said was, I outlined what task the Think Tank for Action and Social Change said in its publication today. That's not rattling off figures. It basically said that the short-term cost of living packages, once off, that we introduced had a very significant impact on people, in helping people to deal with what has been the worst inflationary spiral since the 1970s, which we had after COVID and as a result of the energy crisis resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Those things did happen, and there was an inflationary spiral which we're still experiencing. But the government interventions were probably the most significant across Europe in terms of scale of intervention by the government and impact. But it still didn't go to meet the enormity of the increases that people experienced at the time. So don't say I just rattled off figures. I didn't. I gave a basic, and I then went on to say that we had extended the VAT reduction to 9%, which we did. That's not rattling off figures, that's a fact, which has had some impact in respect of that. I mentioned HRT free of charge coming in the 1st of June. I mentioned free school books, a scheme extended to all students. That is probably, I mean, if you have the one income coming in, we all knew every September, every summer, it was the bane of most parents' lives. School books, going back to schools, and the cost of school books, right? Gone, eliminated. You didn't have the good grace acknowledgement. I don't expect any acknowledgement from it, but you just ignore that in terms of the impact on household budgets. St. Vincent de Paul has said it's had a very significant impact on household budgets. The hot school meal programme has been significant in terms of its impact on children generally, and particularly children from low income and difficult circumstances where they may not get a meal on their way into school in the morning. And then the free public transport was increased, or will be increased, sorry, from 5 years to 8 years. These are all expenditure that frees up income for other expenditures. Now, we also, by the way, passed legislation, as you know, the Food Ombudsman Bill, to deal with and engage and give greater transparency in terms of the entire continuum from producer right to the shelf in respect to supermarket prices and the income that the primary producer gets for food in this country. So that legislation was passed and is there, and the Ombudsman has been established. The Food Ombudsman, different title, but essentially the same, has been established to deal with the issues that you raised in respect of transparency.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy
and
O'Callaghan.
that will have teeth.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And
Deputy
I'll come back to it.
O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, you did rattle off a range of figures about inflation. You didn't acknowledge the real hardship people are facing in terms of grocery prices, and I would ask you to acknowledge that. Taoiseach, last week your government took a decision to lift the pay caps for senior high-paid bankers. Newspapers have reported that that means in one instance that we could see the head of AIB could see the annual package go from 500,000 a year to up to 2 million. So they're the kind of decisions that you have taken that may have immediate effect for people at the very high end in incomes. But what have you done in terms of grocery prices and ensuring that there's full transparency in supermarket profits now? Not something in the future that's going to happen. Why is there not full transparency now? When are you going to act on that? Do you acknowledge that €3,000 a year extra on grocery prices, that's most households are paying, is utterly unsustainable, that there needs to be action taken by government on that now to bring those prices down?
Again, Deputy, I did acknowledge, I've said it a couple of times here today, about the elevated level of grocery prices and the impact it's having on households. So don't please say I didn't acknowledge, I did. But this is your standard practice now. Make assertions that are not true. Of course, prices are impacting on families and households. But the taxation measures we took last year in the budget benefited low-income workers as well as medium-income workers, both through the USC reductions in particular and the income tax reductions. And we did it in previous budgets as well. And again, those are sustainable measures to help people cope with what has been an extraordinary period of growth in prices more generally. We had a significant impact on insurance reforms, which we worked and focused on over the last number of years. So we're looking at every aspect of cost and price with a view to getting prices down. And I can assure you, Deputy, that we understand fully
Thank you,
the
Taoiseach.
degree to which this is impacting on people
Thank
and
you,
households
Taoiseach.
and families, but we've taken very
We now
effective
move-
measures, ones that even the Social Democrats
Time is
didn't
up,
advocate
Taoiseach.
for,
Thank you.
such as free
Deputy
school
Brian
books,
Stanley.
notwithstanding the position you
Deputy
adopt
Brian
on so many
Stanley.
issues.
Thanks,
One
Cora. Taoiseach, the issue I'm raising with you is the problem that people have around the state in accessing a GP or getting a GP to take them on. It's even more difficult for patients, for people who don't have a medical card. It's a huge problem. There's a shortage of locum doctors, which leads to problems for some GPs trying to take holidays or leave. The emergency departments of hospitals are clogged up with people who should be seen in a community care setting or primary care. Some go to the emergency departments either because they can't get a GP appointment or they don't have a medical card and they can't afford the GP visit. Figures from the RSI report recently outlined that we need between 943 and 1,211 to cope with demand. That is just to stand still, not to improve the ratio in terms of the head of population to GPs. But we know from several sources that the number of GPs per head of population is way too low, and it's completely out of sync with our European neighbours and developed countries. The Irish College of General Practitioners has stated that we have a huge deficit, and I'm directly quoting them. That's what they say. They've identified several counties that have a chronic shortage, including County Laois. The IMO concur with this, and they've highlighted this fact as well. The state has only 60% of the GPs per head of population compared to Germany and compared to other EU states. Some EU states are even more favourable than that. The IMO reckon that we need one GP per less than 900 people are required to provide adequate community care. The World Health Organization, Taoiseach, says 1 per 1,000 population. In County Laois, the ratio is on average 1 GP per 1,600 population. Only 35 GPs in the county take medical cards out of 67. At least 700 GPs are to retire in the years between 2023 and 2026. New GPs, Taoiseach, there's not enough of them in training, and in many cases when they're qualified, they're faced with a choice of trying to establish a general practice or emigrating. And so some emigrate because of the cost of trying to establish a practice, pay for premises, hire equipment, hire staff, etc., and the long hours. We have a chronic shortage due to the lack of forward planning by all governments over the last 20 years. So solutions are needed now. We need a major ramp up of directly employed Taoiseach, salaried GPs working in general practice. The Taoiseach said here last week that he's in favour of this as well. Many of those trained GPs would be more likely to remain if they could work in a 35 or 40-hour week job. Particularly a lot of women who are coming into it, and more women are coming in, and that's welcome because unfortunately they tend to have more home responsibilities and caring responsibilities because as a society we have more work to do in that area. The number of training places needs to be increased substantially, and when young GPs, and I'll conclude with this, when young GPs qualify, the HSE need to be actively recruiting them and offering them permanent positions.
Taoiseach, please.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this issue in terms of primary care and GP provision. Undoubtedly in rural Ireland in particular and in some urban areas there has over recent years been challenges in terms of accessing a GP and in terms of getting a GP. On the other hand, there's also been very significant developments and growth, particularly in terms of the number of places at third level has increased very significantly over the last 2 to 3 years. Work that Minister Donnelly did with the Taoiseach when he was Minister for Higher Education resulted in additional places in our colleges. Now it will take some time for those places to come through. We also secured additional places more generally in terms of postgraduate education. And that is important. But also in terms of primary care centres, I think we have an extra 149, I think, additional childcare centres now, or primary care centres in the country, which is I think very significant. 179, sorry, primary care centres. 50 opened, new ones opened since 2020. In terms of chronic disease, 95% of GPs are now signed up to the chronic disease management programme. and over 645,000 patient reviews by GPs in 2024. 92% of patients with chronic disease are now fully managed routinely in primary care and not attending hospital for managing their condition. The number of new, as I said earlier, entrant GP training places has increased significantly, as I said, in recent years, up 350 now since from 2024. College and training places are continuing to grow. An additional 662 student places are being provided in the higher education sector and health-related courses overall this academic year, and that includes nursing and midwifery. So the growth is there within the third level colleges, but also the quality and nature of the work of GPs is changing. So that work in chronic disease is essential, actually, in terms of outcomes, and also in terms of the community enhanced care programme. A lot of GPs speak very highly of its impact. And that's why overall, our figures as a country in terms of life expectancy is improving because of the stronger role of primary and community-based care in the management of chronic disease, and also in terms of public health measures, and also better quality of work within acute hospital services. Our life expectancy is above 82 now. Our mortality rate fell by 11% over the decade 2014 to 2022. The mortality rate for all circulatory system diseases fell by 20% in that period, with heart disease and stroke falling by 28% and 37% respectively. So there's another perspective to our health narrative which rarely gets articulated.
Sure. Deputy Stanley.
For your reply, and I would acknowledge that there's more training places, but as you correctly pointed out, that will take time for them to work through. The one thing we need to do better on is the retention of those who are coming out of courses, and I've outlined to you about directly employed GPs, which the Tánaiste said he's in favour of. Under Sláinte Care, it was a key part of Sláinte Care. Remember that we agreed, it was agreed here in the Oireachtas back all of nearly 8 years ago now. And the importance of primary and community care is absolutely central to implementing Sláinte Care, and it's the cornerstone of a public health system. And we must try and do better on that if we're going to improve things. There needs to be a big shift and a big move, to move healthcare from hospitals to primary care settings. Our hospital wards are overcrowded, our ED departments are bulging. So the best we can hope for with the figures that are coming through at the moment is to stand still. And I'm asking you, Taoiseach, that standing still is not good enough. We have to do better. Life expectancy is getting longer. We will have a lot more older people, a lot more over 80s, and we need to work better at this and try and get more directly employed GPs to supplement ordinary general practice ones in the state. Thank you.
Yeah, the new programme in Galway will be specifically focused on rural GP medicine. Huge investment is going into primary care and going into this area. I mean, practices in receipt of the rural supports receive the maximum rate of practice staff subsidies, significantly reducing possible staff costs for smaller practices. They also receive the maximum rate of locum supports for leave taking. A new locum support initiative commenced in May, providing GPs in receipt of rural practice supports with access to a streamlined locum sourcing service. The annual intake now to the GP training scheme has been increased by approximately 80%. From 2019 to 2024, with 350 new entrant training places made available from 2024. And as I said, 346 new entrants commenced training last year. That was a 21% increase on the previous year's intake of 286. So we'll continue to build on that. And then there was also, of course, recruitment of GPs from abroad commenced in 2023 under a joint HSE-ICGP International Medical Graduate Role GP programme.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
118 of those are currently in practice, and an additional 18 have completed the two-year course.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Now, that concludes Leaders' questions, and in accordance with Standing Order 35, I now call on the Chief Whip, Mary Butler, to move that the arrangements for this week's business be agreed to.